Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Dee and this is Dee's Reading Lounge, where I'm sharing my love for reading at my own pace. Welcome back to another video. So in this video, I am going to be doing a January and February reading wrap up. I am going to be doing these videos every month for the time being, just to see how I like doing them every month versus like a recent reads video. So two of these books that I'm going to talk about, I've kind of mentioned them here and there, but didn't go into give a full recap of what I thought about the book, with the exception of one book. So I won't really talk much about that book, and I'll show you that book in a few minutes. And so if I do like this format, I will continue to do these videos. So it's something I'm experimenting with doing. So let me go ahead and get started because I don't want this video to be long. I had a lot going on in February and I was still able to prioritize my hobby of reading. I'm gonna just briefly skim over this book. This is Cane River, because I did talk about this in, I think, the video that I did of my Black author February recommendations. I talked about this one being my favorite book. And the more I think about this book, I've been trying to hold back of giving it 5 stars. I don't know why, because I can't stop thinking about this book. This book was so good. This book was just so good. I don't think a book have really kept me interested as much as this one since I have gone back on my reading journey. And this book is a chunker. I annotated it like crazy. It had so many good points brought up in this book. It covered a lot of, it was a multi-generational saga. It started from slavery to emancipation and covered about 4 generations of women, I believe, in the family, and how they were able to handle their situation from slavery to emancipation. Even in emancipation, it was still trials and tribulations that Emily, the youngest, who never saw the life of being a slave, she had to still endure. It was heartbreaking, it was raw, it was, of course, emotional. It had all the feels, and the more I think about it, I'm gonna go ahead and give this book a 5 star, just because I really enjoyed it and it just kept me wanting to read. Like, I think I read this in 4 days. It was such a interesting read. So if you want to hear more about like my thoughts, I went into a little bit more details. Check that video out where I talk more about that. But that is Cane River. I read this in January. The next book I read is Josephine by Beverly Jenkins. This was my introduction to Beverly Jenkins. And I absolutely love this one. This one follows Josephine, who's the main character of this book, as she is navigating her young life. Now, Josephine is very mature for her age. She's about 17 and 18 in this book, but already she's been to school. She has her own hairdressing shop, so she's got money coming in. She's got a very supportive mother. Her brother and her father, because this is set in like the late 1860s, going into emancipation, but there's still slavery. Her father and her brother are off fighting the war, so it's just her mother and her. And I love the relationship between her mother. I love the way that her mother treats her as an adult and allows her to make choices and decisions and not like make them for her. She does give her advice, of course, but she always leaves it up to Josephine. So I love the dynamics of the relationship she had with her mother in this book. But really, this story is about her navigating her love life, because it is a romance. So she reunites with her brother's childhood friend, Adam Morgan. And when she sees him, she is immediately smitten. Now, Adam has a reputation of being kind of a flirt as well, but they were enemies. They couldn't stand each other. I believe Adam, they didn't really say how old he was, but he probably was a few years older than she is, being that it was her brother's best friend. But when he sees Josephine, he's also smitten that this ugly duckling has grown up into be a beautiful young lady, and he loves her attitude. He loves the fact that she's got her own business, that she's got a mind of her own, because of his reputation and because, I guess, of that, you know, enemies to lovers. I'm not really a romance reader, but if I had to put this into like a trope, I would categorize this as the enemies to lovers and forced proximity trope, because at one point in the book, He actually, because he comes back from war. Did I mention that? Adam comes back from fighting the same war that Josephine's brother and her father is fighting her. And so he goes to this convalescent home to heal. But after his time is up there, because he is still considered a family friend, her mother allows him to move into their house to fully recover. And so they're like forced to kind of live together. So he's seeing this beautiful young lady going about her way, and he's falling. She's falling too, you can tell, but she, knowing that he's a flirt and knowing that, you know, he's got these flirtatious ways and all these women are drooling over him, she's kind of holding back, but she's smitten as well. But that doesn't stop her from exploring her options. So you see her dating other men as well, but because she knows what she wants in a man, she's very mature in figuring out quickly, you know, who is for her and not. And so I love that Miss Jenkins created a character like this. Even though she was young, she was very mature in her decisions and her choices. The romance was very sweet. It was very innocent. It had substance behind it. It was not any spice in this book. So if you like books with more than spice, this is definitely going to be the one that I would recommend, because it's an innocent and pure love story, like a blossoming young love story. The only critique I would give this book is because it is historical. Some of the language that was used, to me, felt more contemporary than historical fiction. So the historical aspect I didn't buy 100%, just because the dialogue in the book just was more contemporary and it just didn't fit as well. I felt like historical element was just kind of thrown in there because, you know, it's supposed to be a historical fiction. But that's my only critique. Other than that, the book was perfect. I loved it. I rated this, I would say, a 4.5. It's not a long book at all, a little over 220 pages. Definitely would recommend this as your first read if you are new to Beverly Jenkins. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Lucky by Rachel Edwards. I haven't read anything by this author. I bought this a couple months ago. I don't remember. I think I saw this on Storygraph somewhere and I was like, that's an interesting book. Let me just go ahead and get it. So this follows Etta and Ola. They are in a relationship. They live together. Etta wants to get married and move on with her young life and have kids and things like that. Ola is more practical. He wants to save up at least $30,000. They do have a nest egg saved up of $22,000. He wants to have $30,000 for a house deposit before they decide to take that next step. Etta is very desperate and wanting to get married. So one day she's on the website when she encounters a gambling site that promises big wins. So she takes a chance one day and puts some money in and she wins big. And so you know what happens from there if you are familiar with addiction. She gets addicted to gambling and she starts spiraling out of control. She starts lying, stealing, becoming somebody that she is not, okay? And you go through that whole journey along with her. Now, this book does have ups and downs with her highs and lows, and it just speaks to the realistic fact that anybody can fall into this situation, not only like in gambling, but also like a shopping addiction, sex addiction, food addiction, like, and who you can become because of all the bad habits and consequences that you are creating for yourself. This book did not get a very high rating, just mid 3.3 on Goodreads, which I was surprised because when I started the book, I was really enjoying the book. Now, parts of this book kind of went over my head. She does have, like, at the end of the chapter, some excerpts that I just did not get. When I thought about it, 3.3 is probably a good or accurate rating. I would actually give it a 3.5. I did enjoy this book. You know, I would not say you wouldn't like the book if you read it, but it's not like a book that I would like recommend because it was just okay. It was just a okay book. Now, the book did have a little thrill. Would not say that it's a thriller because it wasn't any thrill. And it's not a mystery because you kind of knew what was going to happen a little bit in the story. So I mean, it did have like a twist in the book, like mid book that kind of took me by surprise, that kept me wanting to read and find out. I wasn't really satisfied with the ending, and I don't know, the something about the plot just kind of didn't make sense 100%. But I still like the book. Would I recommend it to you? Probably not, just because it was just like an average book. But good message that anybody is susceptible to addiction. After that was Beverly Jenkins Forbidden. So this follows Edie and Ron Fontaine's love story. It's called Forbidden because Ron is passing for white. Edie is a young black woman. So it starts with Edie's journey to a better life, her wanting to go to California. So she starts on this journey. She has saved up money from her previous job, like as a maid, I think, or somebody who scrubs floors and things like that. So back in those days, $70 was a lot of money, and that's what she had on her. As she goes through this journey, something tragic happens to her, and that's when Ron Fontaine and his best friend, his business partner, finds her almost near death. They bring her to where they live. I think it's called Virginia City or something like that, and help her, recover. She's like on the brink of death. So she finally recovers. She's moved to like a boarding or a convalescent home of this black woman in the area who's a businesswoman. She's got respect in the black community. She eventually befriends her. She rents a room and she starts working for her just to build her life back up and save money. But she still wants to go to California because she sees a better life for herself as a black woman there. Now, this is historical, so this is after emancipation. But of course, that doesn't mean that she's free of discrimination and injustices and things like that. So I love the fact that this was a forbidden romance because Ron, he's passing for white. So he's known in his community by the white people as a smart businessman. He's involved in local politics as well. Beverly Jenkins really knows how to intertwine romance and history. You're going to get a history lesson. There was something, part of this book, I think I did tab that part where it mentioned, let's see, a historical event, and then I ended up looking it up, and it was actually a real event about this man named Wyatt Outlaw. He was assassinated in North Carolina, and they were talking about his lynching in a meeting they were in, and I looked it up, and it was actually a real story. So I like that. I like the fact that the main character, Edie, she was very strong-willed. Now, this is my second book by Beverly Jenkins, and I'm noticing a theme about her. She writes her black women characters, as being strong-minded, what else? Defiant, outspoken, knowing what she wants. And you know what? I have my ideas about that as I get older, about black women having to be supernatural, okay? Having to hold everybody up, having to be strong. And I'm just at the point where sometimes I don't want to be strong, but that kind of thought can be a little toxic, okay? It's okay to have another shoulder to lean on sometimes. Anyway, I know that was off topic or whatever, just my thoughts, but she writes her characters, this is my second book, the lead black women as being strong-willed, outspoken, and Edie was no exception to that. She was all of that, and Ron liked that about her because he was living his life as a white man, so he didn't encounter women like her. I would say this book was a slow burn because of the forbidden element to this, even though you could see that both parties were smitten and just in awe of each other. They knew because she was black, he was white, that could just not work until that part got resolved. It was also a romantic thriller, like in the latter half of the book, that really brought an extra interest to the story. I love this book. It was so good. And I'm definitely going to be reading the next book this month. The next book I read was The Matter is Life by J. California Cooper. This has been on my back TBR list for some years. I bought this copy from a used bookstore or the thrift store. And when I went into this book, I didn't realize that it was short stories. So I do have my reading journal here, and I'm just going to just tell you what I thought about this short story collection in a few words. So my reading journal has prompts in it. So the first question is, what was your first impression of this book? So what I said was that this short story collection, I thought that this was a short story collection about wisdom from an old Southern voice, because it was, I told in third person, like a narrator was telling the stories in this book. It focused a lot of the stories focused on a lot about time, how time can get away, and how when you're young, you may have an idea of what you want for your life. So you go in pursuit of that, and it might not end up how you expected it to, and all the consequences that go with that. Focus a lot on youth, I would say. And you saw the characters in the short story go from being young to old and how life treated them. I'm gonna say a little simple-minded, not complex people, just ordinary Black Southern folks trying to make it in life with what their idea of success was. And either it worked or it didn't work. So one of my favorite short stories was about, I think it was called Evergreen Grass. Yeah, Evergreen Grass is like the third short story in this short story collection. It was about a lady who had a best friend who was also married. She was married. Her best friend was married, but the only parts of her friend's life she could see in her marriage was all the good things, like what her husband did for her. Oh, and she would go back to her husband like, oh, well, I forgot what the lady's name. So-and-so's husband did this for her, and so-and-so's husband did that for her. That was the only thing that she could see. You know, people don't show you who they are, okay? Like even on the internet, people only show what they want you to see or want you to perceive, to believe about them. They're not really showing who they really are and what their life is like. So she only got surface things, you know, fancy things that her husband was doing. And all the time her husband was doing something sick and twisted, and it didn't end up good for her friend. Okay, let's say that. So she ended up realizing, I think, or maybe it wasn't revealed to her. Maybe she didn't find out what truly happened. But we knew as the audience that things weren't as they appeared, because something crazy or tragic, horrible happened to the lady's friend. And so the lesson in that was to be grateful and happy with what you have. Hold on to that and stop wanting what somebody else has, because it might not be greener like you think on the other side. Each character was flawed. Okay, I love that about the short stories. Each character was flawed. It was real life situations they were going through, things that you could picture other people going through, like drug addiction, like being obsessed with beauty, like jealousy, wanting what somebody else has, but all told in a plain, simple voice, regular Black Southern people. I would say I did enjoy this book. I did enjoy the stories. Not all of them I enjoyed, but for the most part, I did enjoy most of the stories. So I definitely would recommend this. I did rate it a 3.5. Right, so the next book that I read was The Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. If you have been watching my channel, you know that this has been highly anticipated. Now, I do have to be honest and say, when I went into reading this book, I definitely had this book in mind, because this is like my holy grail, because it got a 5 stars after thinking about it. And so when I went into this, I was, you know, comparing this book to that book. And because I have read so many nonfiction stories of slave narratives and things like that, I knew what the theme was going to be. This is based on a young lady by the name of Phoebe. Phoebe is mulatto. They used to call mixed people mulatto back then, so she's considered mulatto. She is the daughter of the master on a slave plantation, and the master has a wife that hated her guts, and wanted to make her life a living hell while she was on that plantation. But because she was the daughter of the master, mother of Phoebe was also on the plantation. Because she was the master's daughter, she was treated special. When the master's sister was alive, she taught Phoebe how to read. She taught her how to play the piano. She would show favoritism in that way. And, you know, surprisingly, I don't remember hearing any of the other slaves or complain about that, or there being some strife on the plantation because she did get these privileges. But of course, the wife did not like that. So something happens one day and she is forced to leave the only home that she's known and sold off to a jailer. This was based on a true story of a jailer, and she was deemed the yellow wife, or back in those days they called them wenches. However, this was a unique situation because she was out front. Everybody knew her to be the master's wife. I don't think they had a formal ceremony or anything like that, but you know, if you've read historical fiction set in slave times with a woman, you know, she didn't have any agency over her body. She had to succumb to brutality. I like the fact that Sadiqa did not hold your hand. She did not hold your hand telling this story. It was very descriptive. You felt all the words on the page, what Phoebe was going through, even the brutality as far as, you know, her body is concerned. You felt what she was going through. So having this status on the plantation, well, it wasn't a plantation. I didn't picture it as a plantation. It was actually a jail. He owned a jail where slaves were sold, and I guess it was some compound. So as her position on this compound, people looked up to her. So she did still have privileges, but she was always reminded by, what is his name? I forgot what his name was. I don't remember what his name was, but she was always reminded in subtle ways that she was a slave. She was still a slave, which very much contradicted like his so-called love for her affection for her, because he would, you know, when he wasn't pleased with her, he would remind her who she really was and what her position really was, at the same time of showing affection and, oh, I love you, that's why I love you, or that's why I chose you type thing. But every day on the plantation, she was always trying to outsmart him. She knew what her plan was. You probably read this book, so you already know the history of what happened to Phoebe, you know, when she became the yellow wife to this jailer. So there was children involved, and at every moment she was telling her son, because he actually, oh, it doesn't say it on the back of the book, but she did have a son. So this is going to be a spoiler, but you probably already read this book. I'm the last person that's like read this book. She had a son by another slave on her previous plantation before she was forced to leave. And he was, you know, he was black, a product of her, which is mulatto, and a black man. So, you know, he was black. And so every moment she always told him that he's only a slave. Something to the effect that you're only a slave. I will put it here because I cannot remember it, y'all. I can remember what she used to tell Monroe, her son, because he was treated different. When he grew older, even though she used to always tell them that because she didn't want him to forget that, it was still thrown in his face. Like he was living a different life, even from his mother, because he was considered, you know, black, and he was doing field work, not a field, but he was doing work because it wasn't like a plantation. You know, he kind of didn't believe that because he was faced with the reality of what his position was. And so, yeah. I did like this book. I really did. Did it meet my expectations 100% because of all the hype? I would not say so. And it is a short read. I would definitely say that I did not like how it ended. I felt like the ending, a sequel could be done, because the way it ended, we all know that there was consequences to what she did after she did what she did at the end of the book. I felt like the book was too short and it could have been longer. I wanted actually more. So I gave this a 4-star. I do recommend it. Excellent book. Definitely would continue. And I do have a lot more books from this author that I do plan on reading. And so the next book that I read was What You Leave Behind by Wanda M. Morris. I checked this out from the library. And as I was reading the book, the audio version came available. So I was excited and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to listen to this instead. So I listened to this, the majority of this book, and I'm glad I did, because I really like the narrator. I've heard her before. I don't remember her name, but she really made this book come alive and made me want to continue listening to the book because of how she, went back and forth with her characters, and her voice inflection really made the book come alive. So this follows the main character, Dina. Dina is dealing with a lot of loss. The loss of her marriage, so she's newly divorced, the loss of her mother within the last year or so, and then I think she got fired. She lost her job. So Dina is a lawyer. She decides that she needs a fresh start, or what she calls a day cleanse, and so she moves back home with her father. She's also dealing with some family drama as well, because her father, his name is Jimmy, is recently married to someone she doesn't really approve of. And so she's dealing with that as well. In the midst of all of that loss that she's dealing with, she ends up going on a drive one day, and I think she gets lost. She ends up on this man's property. The man comes out of the house raging with a gun and threatens to kill her if she did not get off his property immediately. Come to find out that the man thinks that, these real estate firms sent a black woman over to threaten and harass him. And so, yeah, that he was coming out blazing with his gun. And so she ended up making it off alive. But that experience really shook her up, and she couldn't stop thinking about that experience. And so one day she is riding in the neighborhood again, and because she's still thinking about that man, she goes over his house again. Not sure why she would do that after what she just encountered, but I forgot why she went over there again. Well, when she goes over there again, she finds that the man was gone off the property, and there was a for sale sign in his yard. That leads her down a rabbit hole, trying to figure out, she couldn't let go of the idea of this man being so adamant about not selling his property, and then all of a sudden there's a for sale sign in his yard and the man is nowhere to be found. So she goes digging and investigating, and she uncovers this real estate scheme that's going on with the Gullah Geechee people losing their homes to this big investment real estate firm for like pennies on the dollar. So she does uncover what's going on and who's involved, which are people, who disguise in sheep's clothing, like in the community, are involved in this whole scheme or whatever. But I found this book to be, exciting, because the audio, listening to it, just brought an extra element of excitement to the book, versus if I would have read the majority of the book. I found that I learned a lot about real estate, and specifically heirs property. So meaning, if you have property, you should have a will. That way, if something should happen to you, then your property will go to who it's deemed to go to, versus all these people coming and having claim or right to make a claim to your property. That could lead to, your family members losing their stake in your property. So I learned about that. It also had a eerie type, I don't want to say fantasy, but a little bit, I would say fantasy, because listening to it, there was someone who was looking over Dina, and after, I don't think every chapter, she would come in and talk about how Dina's getting close and all these secrets about the person who was narrating that part was involved. I would say that she was involved, so she knew exactly what's going on. And as Dina got closer and closer to the uncovering the truth, she would just, be cheering her on. And I loved her voice. I loved her voice in that part. So if you have a chance to listen to this, I definitely would. Another aspect of this book was family, because even though Dina was not happy with her father's wife, her father, Jimmy, and her uncle, her father's brother, Duke, I think, I have a uncle named Duke, had her back and was really looking after Dina. So they ended up getting involved too in the whole investigation, which is something that she didn't want, but because they weren't going to let her go at it alone, they ended up getting involved. So that whole family dynamic with the father and the uncle was very, I would say, relatable, because I have family in my family that would go to bat for me just like they did. Now, I would say the ending could have been written a little better. I don't think I was 100% satisfied with how this ended, but I did really, really enjoy this book. I would rate this 4 stars. It was a good book. I would definitely be reading something else by her again. All right, y'all. So the last book that I read was Who's That Girl by Eve. Now, when I did my February TBR, when I looked at this book, and found out that it was only 250 pages, I kind of knew that it was not going to be that revealing. Let me say that I love Eve as a rapper. She seems like a really nice person. But y'all, she could have kept this book, okay? She could have kept this book, because she did not go into depth at all. I feel like writing this book really didn't have a purpose, because everything that she spoke of, you could probably find it in an interview, or she could have sat down and did an interview. You can also Google the things that she talked about. The book was very surface level. It was very underwhelming. I was very disappointed in it. Although, I can't really say, of course, it was inspiring to see someone go after what they wanted. I did admire that at 15, she knew that she wanted to be a rapper, and she actually went after or chased her dreams. Now, knowing the atmosphere of what the rap industry, the music industry, she did not go into depth at all. She would mention people as an afterthought. Well, I was with so-and-so when this happened to me, and she didn't name drop. She really held back a lot in this book, and I just felt like it was very underwhelming, and I was very disappointed, unfortunately, with this book. Would I recommend you read it? No, because you could Google her, and most of the things can be found on the internet. It was not eye-opening. It wasn't. It just wasn't. This was a disappointment, and I didn't enjoy the book as much. I really didn't. I'm sorry to say that, because I really had high hopes for this book, but in the back of my mind, I knew that it wasn't going to be. She did talk about the industry and how women were not taken seriously. But again, you've heard that before. And I've heard other people in the music industry go deeper in depth about that whole aspect of being in the music industry. She did talk about her family a little bit. She does have pictures in this book. But the pictures just, I don't know, the story, I felt like if her story was more raw, looking at her pictures would, I don't know, I can't describe it. I didn't learn a lot about her, but how the tattoo came about. I was always curious about that. So that is about one thing that I did. The only new thing really that I learned about her. I didn't really learn a whole lot about her. So what did I give this book? Oh gosh, I do rate my memoirs for those things. If I learned a lot about the author, or the person that I did not know before, how raw and real they were they forthcoming? It was none of that. The book wasn't forthcoming. It wasn't eye-opening. It was very underwhelming. It was not raw. It was very surface. She could have just did an interview and called it a day. She did not need to write this book, unfortunately. So 2 stars. I'm sorry, 2 stars. I don't recommend this book. I don't. I read memoirs for a reason, and this just was not it. This just was not it. All right, so that is it. Those are the books that I read for the month of January and mostly February. I did not finish this book right here. This is Jamaica Kincaid at the Bottom of the River. These are short stories. I am reading this in the month of March because it only has, 69 pages, I think, and I'm almost halfway done reading it. So this will be included in my March wrap up. That's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you think of them. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care and be blessed.